pride in that.
Lori had to run and get her glasses.
Don't want to.
Okay, so hopefully she didn't have to go all the way back up to her office.
No, we think they're down now.
Oh, okay, all right.
On two.
But we're going to start without her. She said go ahead and start without her. So.
Lori, hold it.
She went to go get her glasses. I now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7:10 p.m. Before we take our moment of silence, I just would like to send out our sympathies to the Granith family. As you may know, Dawn's husband Carl passed away this weekend at the very young age of 52. Services are Friday and Saturday, so look forward to participating in that, and our hearts go out to the Granith family. So, all righty, we'll take a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The coordinator called the roll.
Ms. Jackson?
Present.
Mr. Rollins? Mr. Scrivano?
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Here.
Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Mr. Escobedo?
Here.
With 7 present, we have a quorum.
We do not have any students here helping with the broadcast, but Alan is here manning all of our equipment and making sure our broadcast on Channel 20 is going great, I'm sure. Thank you, Alan, for your help. We will now recognize and celebrate outstanding contributions of our students and staff. Mr. Earl Dotson Jr. will make these presentations. Earl?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, board members. I'm always excited when we have outstanding student athletes and coaches with us. We will start out with high school diving. Guilford High School junior Britlin Greenlee took 4th place in the IHSA sectional diving tournament to qualify for the state tournament. She was the only RPS 205 student to represent Rockford at the state tournament. Congratulations, Britlin, on your outstanding achievement. Woo! I don't believe Britlin is here, but I certainly want to recognize her accomplishment. Next category is middle school cross country. Flynn Middle School 6th grader Michelle Gasman took 1st place in the IESA Girls Class 3A sectional to qualify for the state tournament. She finished 50th of 236 runners in the state tournament. Congratulations to Michelle Gasman. Congratulations, Michelle. Woo! Next up, Eisenhower Middle School 7th grader Owen Dahlberg finished 1st in the IESA Boys Class 3A sectional to qualify for the state tournament. He finished 53rd of 231 runners at state. Eisenhower 8th grader Eamon Johnson and Flynn 8th grader Marcarius Luster also competed in the IESA state tournament. Macarius took 4th place in the sectional tournament. Congratulations to these 2 wonderful students. Woo! All right, now I know we have some people who are here. The Thurgood Marshall School's boys cross country team took 3rd place at the IESA Class 2A sectional to qualify for the state tournament. The team includes Isaac Bernston, Nolan Bronze, Jackson Jarrett, Peter Maculin, Augie Mays, Noah Nelson, Caden Schroeder, Nolan Sleva, Aaron Tatman, and Alex Worry. Let's give these young student athletes a round of applause and congratulations, they're here. Go ahead, you can go that way. Go ahead. And Where's Alex Worry? Raise your hand. Alex, wish Alex a happy 13th birthday as he goes around. Alex Worry. Good job. I would also like to recognize Deb Johns, who the Thurgood Marshall Middle School cross country coach is here. Deb, thank you. Next up, we have high school cross country. After a strong performance at the IHSA sectional, East High School senior Jordan Van Berger, got it, was the only RPS 205 student to reach the IHSA state cross country meet. He represented Rockford well in the tournament and ran with a mile pace of 5 minutes and 11.1 seconds. Let's give a warm round of congratulations and applause to this young man. Jordan's coaches are also here. Reed Schreck and George Beji are also here. Gentlemen. High school girls tennis. 4 tennis players represented Rockford Public Schools in the IHSA state tennis tournament. Guilford High School's Nicole Christensen won the IHSA Class 2A sectional tournament to qualify for the state tournament. Nicole won her first match 6-2, 6-1 to advance to the second round of the singles championship round. She was defeated in the second round, but she won the second round consolation bracket before losing in the third round consolation bracket. Congratulations, Nicole Christensen. Let's give her a round of applause. Woo! I like that, Jude. Auburn High School's Emma Lay qualified for singles play in the state tournament. She was defeated in the first round of the tournament, but won the first round of her consolation bracket before a loss in her second round. Congratulations, Emma. Let's give her a round of applause. Woo! And last but certainly not least, Guilford High School's Elizabeth Johnson and Suzanne Russo qualified for doubles play in the state tournament. The pair lost in the first round of the tournament and also were defeated in the first round of the consolation bracket, but we're still certainly proud of them. Let's give a round of applause for Elizabeth Johnson and Susan Russo. Woo! All right! Woo! And as usual, certainly let's give a warm round of applause, certainly to all the parents who support their students in these efforts. Woo! All right, parents! Woo! Yeah! Thank you. That is all. Good evening.
All right, thank you. We are now at the petitions and communications portions of our meeting when we invite the public to make comments. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the rights of citizens to petition their government, as well as provides for freedom of speech. Also, the Illinois School Code requires that there be a time at regular and special meetings for public comment. Thus, we are following those mandates during this petitions and communication portion of our agenda. According to our board policy, the public comments portion is limited to a total of 30 minutes. The board will not respond to comments at this time. If it is appropriate, you will be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. We have a clock on the wall to help you with the 2-minute time limit, and we just have one speaker tonight. So we thank you for your interest and your cooperation with our guidelines. Imani Brown is our first speaker tonight. You could hit that button and turn the mic on. There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Imani Brown, and I'm an honors student at Guilford High School. The purpose of being here is that I want to advocate that we learn more about Black history and that our teachers tell us the truth about it and use factual information and not give us work that is their opinion or sugarcoating. Many of my friends, and yes, they're African American like me, don't know their African American history, and that's sad, knowing that their ancestors put up with a lot of racism, killing, and etc. I asked several students today who Emmett Till was, and they told me they did not know who he was because they were not taught about it in school. Hopefully some of you guys know. I hope that the teachers think about this and change their ways and then use this in schools, because many African Americans made achievement and made inventions that we don't get taught in schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to board member comments. Are there any board member comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the consent items, including the meeting minutes of November 22nd, 2016, payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders, contracts under 10,000, construction bid pay request log and travel, the bid recommendation for Sterling Holly renovations, recurring contracts for Title I for services with Compass Learning, the Rockford Leadership Alliance contract, the KMK contract, the addendum to the recurring contract for PEG-COTCH for Federal Arts Grants Program, and then the other consent items including the student fees, workers' compensation settlement agreement, and the Freedom of Information log. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr.
Second.
Connor, second by Mr. Rollins. Are there any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Ms. Jackson?
10, all,
All of
and
10.
then 11A.
11A and all of 10. Any others? Now I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the items, consent items not pulled.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thinking that we're probably going to have to do all the 10 items separately? No, together? Okay. All right. I'll take a motion then to approve items 10A through 10D.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Ms. McCullough.
So just for clarification on the KMKs, that 10C, I believe, that is an additional 22 of contract that we already have. We're not doing a new $40,000 contract, correct?
It is new, so the old contract has expired, so this is a new,
Okay. So the old contract expired when?
at the fiscal year, the last
Oh,
fiscal.
so we had nothing, my apologies.
We did
We
not
have
have-
nothing with them right now.
No, we do not.
So the whole 40 is new.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for answering that.
Any other questions or discussion? Now I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of items 10A through 10D.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
No.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 no.
And I'll take a motion for item 11A, which is the student fees.
So
Moved
moved.
by Mr. Connor. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mr. Rollins. Questions or discussion?
I'm just trying to turn it off.
Okay. Oh, there you go. Ms. Jackson.
I have a question about direct certified students. Who can speak to that?
Mary Ann is back there.
So what does it mean to have students that are direct certified?
So direct certified students are students that the state automatically, the state, in the old days when we had food service, their fees would automatically be waived. The state automatically waives those fees, and we use that criteria to waive our fees as well.
So are we still doing that even though we're using the community eligibility program, how are those two working together then? Because all students get free lunch, correct?
Right.
So
That's
then why do we still have students that are direct certified? Why is that?
So there's two things that need to there's three pieces of the puzzle for direct certified, three things that are important. First of all, we need to know that for just our regular grants, so for example, our federal grants, we need to have that information. Title I, all of those kinds of grants need that information. So we have to get that information somehow. The other reason is the state says if you're not going to feed the kids and you don't take a lunch application, you have to do something to prove that you can waive fees for students that, with some requirements. And so the state requires that you have to waive fees for direct certified students. That's a requirement of the
I
state.
understand. So students, even though they're on this community eligibility, they're still filling out the application for free and reduced lunch?
It's a different form. It's a tuition, I would call it, it's a waiver form, a fee waiver form. It's one that we created the form ourselves.
So every student fills this out?
Not if you're direct certified. If you're direct certified and the state says these kids automatically qualify, we do not have them do that. Because they've already filled out the paperwork at the state level. So we've used this, we created that as part of our criteria, so that those parents don't have to continually filling out paperwork. So if you're directly certified from the state, and the state has a website that we can go to, we do not have those families fill those forms out again. It's a waste of everybody's time, because they've already filled out that paperwork that says that their income is below a certain
Okay,
criteria.
where did they fill that paperwork out is my question. Where?
They do it at the, I want to say where they would get, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the place, but at the state places where you would get your Medicare card and your any of those other, the link cards at those places. That's where they fill it out. And the
So
state
we
sends us-
access that information?
We get, the state sends us that information.
Okay.
We get the file from the state for that.
So, and my other question is on the fees that can be waived, which are the athletic fees, co-curricular fees. Is cheerleading anywhere in this?
Cheerleading is part of a co-curricular, so those fees would be treated the same.
Because I've talked to some parents, and those fees aren't often waived for cheerleading, so that was my question. I didn't know if cheerleading was included.
It should be, to me, it's a sport, so it should be. So the participation fee would be.
Yes.
I don't know if they have other fees that they attach to that. I'm not aware of those.
So the
but
participation fee should be waived?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Now I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of item 11A, the student fees for fiscal year 18.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
All right, we are now on to the closed session consent agenda items, including the following: the HR organizational report and addendum, and the student discipline, where the board adopts and accepts the hearing officer's findings and recommendations in the following cases in which the students expelled or suspended are prohibited from being on the school grounds and school-sponsored activities without the prior written permission of the principal. The expulsion for GDM 4019-17 is held in abeyance, contingent upon an expulsion and abeyance agreement for the remainder of this school year and the first semester of next school year. The expulsions for students GDM 4020-17 and 4028-17 are held in abeyance, contingent upon an expulsion and abeyance agreement for the remainder of this school year and the first trimester of the next school year, 17-18 school year. And the following closed session consent items for student discipline EIAs: students 1001-17, 3061-17, 3076-17, 3092-17, 3094-17, 3097-17, 3098-17, 3100-17, and student 3101-17. Is there a motion and a second to approve the closed session consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Any items that board members would like to have pulled for separate consideration? None, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the closed session consent items.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Abstain.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses and 1 abstain.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett.
I'd like to cede my time to Chief Academic Officer Mr. Richard Schroeder. He's going to be reporting on state testing, and we will have a much more thorough report that will cover additional aspects at Ms. McCulloch's next scheduled Ed Committee meeting. But I think we will cover a heavy focus on the PARCC results at tonight's board meeting.
Thank you for the time. I'm told I have 90 minutes or less to put this presentation together. We spent the afternoon whittling it down from 126 slides to, I know. In the event that I do run too long, please let me know. To put together a presentation regarding PARCC requires some background information. So we tried to put together an overview of what PARCC is and then go into the data. There are other assessments that we deliver in our district that we'll report on during Ed Committee in January. This is a PARCC overview for our viewing pleasure. So one of the things that we'd like to just go through real fast is what PARCC was meant to be. And PARCC is the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. It's supposed to be an online assessment that measures the Common Core. It was developed by ETS, Educational Testing Services, and Pearson is a major assessment provider. Pearson creates the questions, Pearson does the statistics and analytics. And it really includes English language arts and math. Again, it's supposed to be an online assessment. Students take online assessments at certain times throughout the year. However, in the history of Illinois, we relied on paper pencil assessments. So what makes PARCC different than what had occurred in Illinois before, ISAT, for example? So PARCC is different in that it tries to assess students' problem-solving abilities. It presents challenging problems that are multi-tiered. Instead of having the traditional paper pencil fill-in-the-bubble test, where you're choosing A, B, C, or D, PARCC may have multiple correct answers. It may ask a student to drag and drop something into a bucket and then write about how it's either correct or how they found that to be correct. Again, PARCC is supposed to be more of a critical thinking assessment, not just standard memorization. So one of the foundational things for PARCC that was presented when Pearson presented PARCC to the state of Illinois and other districts and other states is that it was a technology-based test that required certain skills. Drag and drop, shading text, cut and paste. So imagine third graders through eighth graders may or may not have these skills when taking the PARCC assessment, which is why the state of Illinois, for reasons including the fact that we didn't have a lot of technology in certain districts, offered a paper pencil version of PARCC, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But these are the skills that are required, as well as the ability to read and comprehend at grade level, that are needed to become proficient as measured by PARCC. So PARCC transitions. A little bit of background, kind of a timeline. In 2014, if you were to go one step to the left, we administered ISAT in RPS and across the state. ISAT was the Illinois Standard Achievement Test. It was paper pencil. In 2015, PARCC was introduced for the first time across the state of Illinois. We had 2 testing windows in the state in that time, in March and May. Both scores were needed to have a valid score. English and math in grades 3 through 8, English 3 and Algebra 2 at the high school. Online in our district, we had 6 buildings that tested 1 grade level only. All others were paper-based. In 2016, that was last school year in May, we had 1 test window. The partnership feedback from districts and states that 2 windows was too much testing time. So you reduced the testing time to 1 window. Districts set their own window that occurred around the 90% mark of the school year. Again, we tested ELA and math in grades 3 through 8, English Language Arts, ELA 3, Algebra 2. One major difference is we had 8 buildings totally test online in 2016. And then you can see ELA and math grades 5 and 8 were online, and so is ELA 3. This coming year, again, we have 1 test window that's set in April. ELA and math grades 3 through 8. Park is eliminated at the high school in favor of SAT. Online will be 100% in our district. Exceptions include students with disabilities for IEPs, and charter schools are still to be determined. I present that because the testing time was reduced for Park between 2015 and 2016. If you can see this slide, this is the total testing time for the 2 years. So there was a reduction in testing time when you went from 2 windows in 2015 to 1 window in 2016. However, the results from Park still lag behind in terms of immediate feedback for teachers. So if you're a teacher and you have 3rd graders and you had administered the Park assessment in 2015, the results don't come back to your building, in that case, until November of 2015. So your students are either in 4th grade in the same school, somewhere else within the district, or in somewhere else separately altogether. 2016 was really no different. Results we received in September. Again, the students are, if they're 5th graders, they're not even in your same building. They're in a middle school. So the results, in terms of providing feedback for teachers to make actionable corrections, to do things that would allow students to improve, do not come in a timely manner. And we anticipate this coming administration to be similar. Now, why is that a problem? My son plays basketball. He's an 8th grade basketball player, had a game tonight. If I were to take a video of that game tonight and not show it to him for 4 months, and then try to coach him and try to put together a practice routine, would that be timely feedback for him? Would he have any memory of that game? He may be playing in high school by then. He may have improved at his 3-point shot by then. I may have bought contacts for him by then so he can make that shot. The idea behind this is simple. Just like ISAT, Park, even though it's meant to provide feedback for our teachers and parents, does not fulfill that bill. And that's a problem that the state has recognized, our district certainly has recognized, and our teachers recognize. So, when we go into the results of Park, I'll point out that Park changed the testing format in Illinois. It also changed the level by which we measure student performance in Illinois. ISAT had 4 levels. Did not meet, partially met, met, and exceeded. Park has 5. And we'll make that comparison in a minute. You can see the different levels for Park. So here's a composite 3-year trend of our state assessment data going from 2014 ISAT on the bottom to 2016 Park on the top. Composite means it's a combination of ELA and math, all students who took the assessment. Notice that in 2016 our meet or exceeds is 20%. 2014 for ISAT, it was 42%. If you look at only the green and dark green for ISAT, you'll see that it almost measures the 3 levels for Park. Pretty close. If we revealed the state assessment results during that same time, you'll see that ISAT for the state was at 60% in 2014, and the state Park results in 2016 are 34%. And we'll just point this out because in reality, when the state went from ISAT in 2014, the paper-based pencil test, to a PARCC assessment that was administered online to about 75% of the state, the results dropped. Partially because of different levels, partially because of the test environment, partially because of a lot of factors, results dropped 26%. The results in RPS dropped 22%. This happened across the state, not just here. So as we go forward in the data analysis, please keep that in mind. The results across the state drop is when we went from a paper pencil test for ISAT in 2014 to PARCC in 2016. We have an ELA 3-year trend. This is, again, all students, ELA, in the district. You notice the district ISAT score in 2014, 39%. District 2016 for PARCC, 23%. And then if you were to look at the different levels, imagine 4 levels for PARCC instead of 5. And then look at the state results for ELA. So you'll see a similar, here's the bar for the state. So one way to look at this data is to say, okay, if we had 4 levels instead of 5, would the results in the state and the RPS be similar? Another way to look at this data is to say, given that we have a more rigorous assessment that we're doing with our students, and that we don't have feedback coming until the next school year, it's no wonder that we have trouble, as most districts do, looking at the scores and making corrections as we go. It's the math 3-year trend, similar to the ELA 3-year trend. You notice the district ISAT results in 2014, district PARCC results in 2016. Notice they're very near the 2015 results for PARCC and the state results. We had a speaker in the board meeting last time around that mentioned some surrounding districts, the comparison districts, and how they perform compared to RPS. And while we don't have really a comparison set of districts that we've looked at to measure ourselves against, these are districts that we pulled that have similar demographics that are, maybe slightly smaller than our district or surrounding us. And we just highlighted 3. Our Rockford Composite, Peoria Composite, Freeport Composite. You can see CPS is here, Springfield is, and you can also compare the 2015 results to the 2016 results. Again, this is comparison purposes only. There's much more data than this, obviously. A lot of this data is taken from the Illinois State Report Card, which in Ed Committee, when we go through this in January, we're going to actually walk through how to analyze this data so we can all look at it with that eye. When we measure our district performance in subgroups, this is where the analysis should get interesting, because this is where we as a district, as a curriculum team, as an administrative team, as a school leadership team, should look at the different results and make modifications and action plans that can correct the achievement gaps. So if you look at this result list and you look at met or exceeded, you'll notice that our students with disabilities have a very low met or exceeded score. And if you add up approached, met, and exceeded, it's still far below the composite. In fact, the glaring number is did not meet. If you look at low income, which we'll look at in more detail in a few minutes, you'll see that the 3 combined give us a pretty good number that's close to the district average. And then these 2 numbers are areas that we can improve on. Again, we're looking at achievement data in groups of students. In reality, the best way to look at these snapshots is at the school level, because at the school level is when we can say in a PLC in the classroom as a SIP team, here is an achievement gap we notice. What are some action steps that we can take to improve on this result? These are scatter plots that are generated by Illinois Report Card. We decided to pick out the low income composite to measure these results so we could just demonstrate how this could be measured and shown in a group or measured and shown in a PLC. So if you look at one graph, you have the percentage of students meeting or exceeding in this subgroup. So any student who's in the low income subgroup is on this graph, this side, this axis. This is the percentage of low income students in this school or district. Here's where our district lies. These are all the districts in the state of Illinois, and you'll notice the regression line and where we sit. Now, that's for comparison purposes only. Context does matter. While there are school districts in this area, there's a story to be told about those districts. It's very difficult to say RPS should be here based on comparisons to this district because there are different factors at play. Tenure of teaching staff, for example. Resources that are allocated to meet the needs of students. The aligned curriculum. Practice that students have taken on the PARCC exam. Remember all those different technology skills required to take this assessment. Reading level. There are multiple factors at play. So for us to say with any confidence that we should be here or here is not as easy as just saying that. In reality, it requires us to examine our context in RPS, our context in our community, where our students come from, how they get to us, what we have put in place, what has worked, what has not, and what we can do in the future. This is a composite low income for our high schools. Don't forget, on this axis is the percentage of students meet or exceeding in that subgroup. And here is the low income percentage in the school. These are the high schools. We'll do the same for the middle schools. Again, don't forget on the side, percentage of students in that subgroup meeting or exceeding percentage of low income in the school. The composite low income for elementary schools. Notice there are many more dots on the scatter plot. We will not highlight all the schools because that would have covered up the entire graph. But here are select schools. And we'll share this presentation with you and the means to acquire this scatter plot so you can locate the other schools. It's a matter of hovering over the dot and seeing that school pop up. Again, don't forget, this is the low income percentage, the percentage of students meeting or exceeding on PARCC in that subgroup only versus the percentage in the school. You can do the same thing for students with disabilities. Same thing for students of Latino descent. You can do the same thing with any subgroup that exists in the school. And then finally, our low income for special programs. Again, the same axis. So one of the things we'd like to highlight is the fact that we brought a new assessment into the district this year. I talked about the lag time for PARCC results to get back into our district. The fact that my third grader who takes the PARCC assessment this April, I will not see the results until next school year, and I may not even see the results at all because that student may have gone to a different school and the results follow them. So as a teacher, I'm not sure if what I did worked. So the NWA MAP assessment, the Measures of Academic Progress assessment that we brought into the district, allows you to predict PARCC results with a 24-hour turnaround. So my student in third grade or fifth grade or eighth grade who takes the MAP assessment, I can have the results in 24 hours. I can see that based on our fall assessment this year in ELA, we have these percentages of students right now meeting or exceeding. Now that doesn't tell you a lot. That only tells you a large group of students who are meeting or exceeding predicted by the MAP assessment on PARCC. In reality, this information is best used by our teachers. So my delight is when I go into buildings or talk to teachers and they tell me, yes, I have 50% of my students achieving their growth target already, and I know exactly what students are going to be in different groupings related to park. Now, is there some variance in terms of the accuracy of this? Of course there is. Students grow from now until April. Students grow at different rates. A test is only a snapshot. So a student may have had a very bad test day because they had a headache or something occurred at home or something happened at school. And they may have a fantastic testing experience when they're taking the park assessment or vice versa. The more snapshots we take of our students' and performance, the better we can track their growth. This is a projection of park proficiency in math based on the fall assessment scores. Our students are taking the winter assessments right now for MAP, so that's why teachers are talking about the progress. And finally, MAP serves as one of our predictors of future college success. And when we get to Ed Committee in January, we'll also talk about the PSAT results that just came in this week to provide some information related to how our students may succeed in a college class. And this is a milestone right here. If you think about our 9th graders in reading and math, the percentage of students who achieve these two percentiles, a national percentile is on a scale of 1 to 99, the percentile you'd like to have, the higher the number, the higher you're achieving. So if you think about students in reading who are at the 60th percentile or above in 8th grade, we have roughly 29% of them achieving at that level. That's a measure that we should seek to improve. That's a number we can improve, and that goes down the list, reading and math. So, future assessment data that's coming in our district. PSAT, I mentioned those results already. 8th graders took the PSAT in November. Those results are coming in January. SAT occurs April 5th. We have a park administration in April of 2017, and finally in May, we'll take our last MAP assessment for the year, which will tell us the percentage of our students who met or exceeded their growth targets. And finally, the last part, the findings and the questions, because there are lots of questions you can generate when you're looking at assessment data. What is the impact of online testing and environment in our district? If we look at the schools that went fully online last year, the average drop, you would say, the average met or exceeds score went down 6%. A high of 9, a low of 5. RPS has experienced similar results when compared to other large districts in the state. So our results are really not much different to other large districts. Even districts that have a higher achievement level in terms of park met or exceeds, there's still some variance in terms of the results from 2015 to 2016, and there certainly is a variance in terms of a drop in the met or exceeds number from 2014 on ISAT to 2016 today. Our new assessment provides teachers with immediate feedback for our students. Again, data in hands of teachers is the first step to making modifications for students to be supported in success. And it would be remorseful if I didn't talk about literacy acquisition, because every standardized test is in essence a literacy test. Even a math assessment in PARC requires students to read at or very close to grade level to achieve success. If I were to give you a computer and ask you to shop on Amazon, you still have to be able to read the text to follow the directions and know what to do to achieve success in buying that Christmas gift or that gift that's coming for your loved one. The same is true with an online assessment, or any assessment for that matter. So when we look at PSAT results, when we look at MAP results, when we look at PARC results, the more foundational literacy skills we can provide our students in the grades K, 1, and 2, to the milestone of having more students at reading level when they enter third grade, the better our results will be as a district for Park. And finally, we have additional assessment information coming in January, so we'll try to make that a brief presentation, but it could be longer than this one. And that wraps it up. Questions, please.
Mr. Connor?
I assume these slides will be made available.
Certainly.
So I have three kind of questions, comments. One is definitely a comment. What might be logical, but it seems the worst results are across sixth grade, which might make sense because you're transitioning to a really different kind of environment.
Sure.
But the math number overall for everything is much below. And I know we got the textbooks that were passed, what was that, 4 months ago, 5 months ago?
Correct.
And I think, one of my comments is that I agree that literacy obviously impacts the math, but considering the environment in Rockford and the need for qualified individuals for manufacturing and many other kinds of roles, it seems to me particularly notable that the math scores are so low. So I think one of the challenges I'd really like to hear, and I know, we're building up many things over time on this, but I think that one, to me, the combination of sixth grade and math is something I'd like to see addressed. Because and I know testing isn't the answer for everything, but those really struck me. And I am glad, FYI, to have seen the scatter plots for the low income and all the rest, because that actually was one of my immediate questions, so I'm glad you did that. I think, while I'm not questioning Park in general, and I've said this a couple times, I'm not blaming the test, trust me. But I do wonder, if I remember correctly, there is a trend where there are states that are disengaging with Park.
Yes, there are.
And I really do think it's important for us to understand as a board the impact of that and why that is. I know Illinois is committed to it, so I do understand that, but I do think also if states are disengaging, I think I'd like some statement on what that means for us and what the impact is. And then the third point is, I know the computer setups do affect the results, and as you well said, there are certain skills that a number of the students don't have, but it seems like if online is the basis going forward, and you said as of 17 that will be the case. And I know tonight we've got on here to pass another 1.6 million or something like that for replenishing that. I really do think that we have to have some approach to helping kids with the skills. And I think the other part, if I might say so, one of the complaints I get is that the whole setup and the time frames for these tests is very limited, and teachers do complain about that. So I think my sense is that there are some logistics where we could help them out in, both the professional development, but really having the environments ready and ready to go in those time frames. So, I will not hide the fact that we've had a lot of criticism that I think has been unfair in a lot of ways, but if you look at those numbers, I think we can well understand why the public would not be happy with these results.
Right.
And so I know that sounds like a general complaint. I apologize that that's the way it sounds, but when you're out there talking to people, you do get this an awful lot. And these kinds of results, and again, have to say the math part is awfully hard to justify. So I think this is one where, I'm not even sure I know what I'm asking for in terms of follow-up. I have to be drop dead honest,
Well, let me
because I don't know the answer,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, these are really ongoing issues, and
Well, I just want to jump in and say, this is part of our strategic plan.
It is.
And strategies and tactics are in place,
Right.
and we will get updates quarterly and getting, holding administration and their team accountable for that progress to be made, so.
I addressed those three things real fast.
Sure.
Number one, we initiated on a math curriculum alignment. We approved the resources for this year for grade 6, 7, 8. There's little doubt that the transition from 5th grade to 6th grade is impactful in a number of ways for students. You mentioned the middle school transition. It is the case in lots of districts. In fact, everywhere I've ever worked and analyzed this data, that is the case. So there are three-prong efforts to correct that. Number one, there's a middle school transition that we're undertaking to plan a better transition for students from 5th to 6th. The middle school math curriculum, we had a meeting of our math curriculum leadership team today. And a lot of the discussion was around not the PARCC results, but the assessment results that we're seeing so far. How we're utilizing this new curriculum resource and how the maps are allowing us to modify our instruction to meet the needs of all of our students. And finally, PARCC, as you saw with the transition from ISAT to PARCC, as states discontinue their use of PARCC, the state of Illinois is in that same boat following this year's assessment. And we've already seen movement away from PARCC at the high school level to go in favor of an SAT assessment that is, by a lot of accounts, a more worthy assessment in terms of college and career readiness, predicting AP proficiency, allowing us to see our students' progress from 8th grade to junior year. So one of the things that we've talked about in the state of Illinois, and I'm blessed to be on certain committees, is the idea that maybe in Illinois we'll allow districts to choose the assessment they use for growth. Or maybe the state will adopt the NWEA MAP assessment for the growth factor that delivers results right away. So we are pushing on those things because, in essence, we would like to see an assessment that's reported to the state that provides immediate feedback. That we can make corrections in the moment instead of waiting for something that's an autopsy of sorts. And that's what the push is in the state of Illinois. And you'll hear that from the southern tip to the northern state line and east to west.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Rollins with the difficult microphone there.
Just trying to get
Okay.
You indicated that the method that the charter schools are going to use to test is still to be determined. Who's going to determine that?
So we have a meeting with the charter schools coming up after the winter break, and we'll discuss with them how we can deliver this assessment. We would like to have them delivered online, because that would allow us to provide accurate comparison data, so we can see what the results are across our system for all of our Rockford kids. In the past, it's been left up to the charter school, and it is, in essence, left up to them. So we're going to leverage that with them. We like to see the same assessment used across the board in the same fashion. And that's what we'll decide after the new year.
And I would think we would want the same assessment used across the board as well. And my recollection, maybe I'm misremembering, is that when we renewed the charter school contracts, we included language to ensure that we could control which assessments they were going to use. So
They already use MAP, which is nice, and that we can look at the growth data between our schools. They were using MAP long before we were. Now the PARCC assessment is one that we have to make sure, given the differences from paper-based versus online testing, that we try to do the same thing across the system, and I'll include the charter schools in the system, because they're all of our kids, and we want to make sure we can accurately measure their performance.
Right, but as you indicated, we want to make sure we're also comparing apples to apples, and I think the only way we can do that is to make sure that we give the same test using the same methodology across the district.
And this will be at the same time for PARCC, where we administer the assessment the same way 2 years in a row in terms of the one testing window. The difference will be between 2016 and 2017, the online nature of the test across the system.
Other comments? Ms. Jackson?
May you go to the slide with the think it's, you call them, refer to them as achievement gaps?
Let's see. This one.
So achievement gaps are historic. I mean, they were, when I was in high school, there were achievement gaps. There continue to be. So in knowing that, please speak to, I guess as a district, what are our thoughts? Like, what are some of the plans that we have? I know you talked about PLCs and addressing it at that level, but can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, so first of all, the foundational instructional content has to be aligned. We mentioned middle school math, for example. The middle school math teachers, as they speak, they talk about supporting all students, which includes students with disabilities, students who are English language learners, students from all backgrounds. And that has to be built into our curriculum maps, that we have this flexibility so teachers can make sound teaching decisions with resources at their disposal. In essence, what teachers have at their disposal now is an assessment that aligns to the measure, where we can look at achievement gaps within 24 hours instead of waiting for 4 months, which allows us to see if what we're doing is applicable. Number two, we've actively started training more teachers in the ESL strategies for our English learners. We are working with our special ed population of teachers to make sure that we have IEPs that support student learning and allow for flexible service delivery so we can accomplish our students with disabilities, so we can increase this performance level. In terms of the rest of the students on this list, every school has a different result. So this is the composite for the district. We ask schools in their SMART process to identify a subgroup that maybe is lagging behind. And that subgroup is applicable to a specific action plan that would address that subgroup. So, is it the Tier 1 curriculum that's lacking? Is it us needing to have more teachers who are schooled in the English language learner strategies that are good for all kids, but specifically for that subgroup? Those are all questions that we have to ask in individual places, because this achievement gap is not necessarily across the system. It's different in different schools. Those are the things we are trying to attack. In reality, what we'll do is look at the MAP assessments after the winter and see where these achievement gaps lie in the moment, instead of relying on something that occurred last May. And that's when we'll have more information with which to course correct in individual schools. But the Tier 1 curriculum is first. If we don't have a foundational curriculum across the board, as a result of our 4- and 5-year plan, I'll use math as the first example. You've heard about Reading Horizons in the K1 and 2 trial. Those are things that are coming online that will allow teachers to ensure that all students have access to these chances to be at reading level by 3rd grade, achieving math proficiency throughout the system. And those are the ways we're correcting or supporting our teachers at this moment.
Mr. Escobedo?
So, yeah,
No, go ahead.
so I guess I just want to echo some of the comments here. It's one of those things that we're going to have new schools, and I know Mr. Rollins has talked about this in the past. We're going to have new schools, and, we got better infrastructure, IT systems, and so forth. But our academics are still not quite there. So I guess myself and Ms. McCulloch, as part of our board champions for growth and achievement down the road, we should probably be more active and look forward to, discussing this more in detail in Ed Committee. But farther than that is, discussing more of the plans for down the road as how we really improve our academics as a district.
Agreed.
So I guess just echoing some of the comments here that, I don't know, we really have to get better at, we really have to improve this test course. And and have a longer-term plan for achieving. I mean, I know, like I said, I know we've talked about this before, and it just seems like it's a continued struggling problem for many, many years. And yes, we have addressed as a district many of the other issues, buildings, infrastructure, but somehow we've got to address this.
It's a huge challenge.
Oh, absolutely.
A huge
Not
challenge.
not diminishing.
The huge challenge is how to ensure that all of the students who leave our district when they become seniors and we achieve the 80% or better graduation rates are college and career ready. Well, it really starts in K2. If you look at literacy scores and the fact that our students are leaving second grade, some of them without the literacy skills to tackle assessments like this, to read for meaning instead of learning to read. That's an active discussion. That's why the Reading Horizons pilot was so important to try to put in place, because that addresses two key components that are foundational to reading success: numeric awareness and phonics. And as we look at the data and bring that data back to Ed Committee, that program, those two strategies for early literacy will lay the foundation for our students to become readers for meaning as they go forward. That's one of our goals, is to put in place milestones, i.e., what percentage of our students are reading at grade level when they enter third grade? And what are the strategies we need to put in place? And the Reading Horizons trial is one of the key levers, we'll say. Our teaching staff who are in our curriculum leadership teams, our teaching staff who have volunteered, or not volunteered, but who have stepped forward to become leaders in these areas, the answers are in the room. When we meet as an instructional council on Wednesday, tomorrow, one of the key topics is this report. What are we going to do as a system, collaboratively, to move this needle?
Mr. Rollins.
Could you go back to the slide for the special programs?
Oh, sorry.
And I blew by that when you put it up.
I will tease you that you're probably at your 90-minute limit. Okay.
I'm waiting for the red light to come out.
Okay.
This is the one, Mr. Rollins?
Yeah. So, just a couple of comments. One, when you do, it helps me with these scatter plots if you can do the average line. And I think in the past, sometimes we've done the average line for the district. Maybe even for a state, showing what the state average looks like.
We'll provide that for the committee.
But it sort of lets me do a quick scan to see sort of who's doing better than you might expect and who's doing worse than you might expect.
Sure. We'll include that for the committee presentation.
So, but I really wanted to just say this in the context of we've just completed the strategic planning process for all of these special programs. And we do special programs because in theory, that's a way of getting better results for kids. And so, the ones that I was involved in, especially this last one, I was very clear with them that people are going to start hearing the phrase academic return on investment a lot more. We need to start seeing a return on our investment, and all of these programs are an investment, and most of them are an investment above and beyond just our general education programs. And so, I hope that as we, particularly those strategic plans, as we implement those strategic plans, and as a board, we will be asking the administration to show us how they justify these investments and how they can show us that these special programs are in fact effective. I think that's one of the things we're going to have to start looking at.
Okay. Mr. Connor?
Yeah, one quick thing on this is, I know Kappa is missing, right? If I'm not, I don't think it's separated out, but I could be wrong. It's kind of hard to see it.
It's
But-
not separated out. We can
Okay,
provide that.
I think, I would just want to make sure that all the programs are represented on this one. And I agree with what Mr. Rollins said. I think having some of the averages, and I think we had done this before last year, right? Where we had the trend lines, and I think we did it by the elementary schools and so forth, and I think that was really helpful to take some of those as a standard. So I agree with that. That's
We'll provide
a
that.
really necessary piece. And my only other comment, sorry, I I don't know, I must have had the less than positive water that I was drinking
Okay.
today. But the one that really hits me is, and I don't mean it to offend our friends in Chicago, but the fact that the CPS did better than us, whoa. I mean, I really, I know that's a technical term, but seriously, I mean, I think, you know, one of the lessons learned is where some of these really do better. I think we had talked about this last year. I think we do need to know what are some of the things that some of these schools are doing, because even last year, we had the income level, and there were some schools that had high poverty levels that were over the average. And one of the lessons learned was, hey, they have to be doing something. And I mean, you know, I would just say that there's some of the, you know, extreme poverty districts doing better than us is a real question in my mind.
It is in ours. We've initiated some visits to sites that have higher than you would consider results for means of school improvement planning, but also means of programming, things that support all students. And the Ed Committee will hear about those visits soon. The idea is that, like you said, Mr. Connor, if there are schools that are outliers, what are they doing? More importantly, probably in our district, if we have schools that are outliers or grade levels that are outliers, for example, a fifth grade team at a certain school that is on this scatter plot, the school is below the trend line in terms of their, or above, I should say, in terms of their performance. Why don't we go with that school and see what they're doing? Because those are things that are internal. When I say the answers are in the room, if we were to look at our immediate feedback data from MAP and other things, there are outliers on a positive swing. I just heard about one today. So my purpose is to go to that classroom next week, obviously call the teacher first, and say, hey, what are you doing differently? Why? And that's important for us to look at.
Okay,
Thank
great
you.
job.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. It's really important stuff. That's why it's number one in our strategic plan. All right, Education Committee report, Mrs. McCulloch.
Ed Committee has not met since our last board meeting. I was just trying to look up a date here. We meet again in January. We will not be meeting in the month of December. When we meet in January, we'll have two reports. One will be on our early childhood program. The other will be a deeper dive into all the testing for the district. So if you
Great.
think of more questions that are really on your, I mean, you don't have to wait till January. I know that Mr. Schroeder will answer those ahead of time, but feel free to come, any of the board members, and see that.
Thank you. Mr. Rollins, Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee met here at 5:30 PM on Monday, December 5th. And let's see, we had an update on our fiscal year 18 multi-year projections from the consultants that we hired to do that with us, working with our finance department from Forecast 5 Analytics. That's going to be, I'm sure that's posted on board docs if you want to take a look at it. They only took it through, I think, fiscal year 20. When they do these sorts of projections, what you have to keep in mind is that they do it based on a certain set of assumptions. So the important things really are the assumptions. And they walked through all of their assumptions with us. You know, we asked them a number of questions. But I guess the couple of points that I think you should know about that I wanted to tease out. The state funding that we see they're projecting is going to, absent a change in the state funding formula, which could happen, might not happen, but if there's not a change in the state funding formula, we're looking at a decrease in state funding over the next few years for two reasons. The state general state aid formula is based in part on EAV. So that it's a way of getting more money to districts with lower EAV and higher poverty. So the good news as a community is that we've turned the corner on our EAV and our EAV is starting to rise. The bad news for us from the state funding standpoint is that once that gets plugged into the general state aid formula, and there is a little bit of a lag before that works its way through, but in about 2 years, we're going to start seeing reductions in our general state aid payments from the state of Illinois because of that. The other largest component of it shows up as local revenue, but I really think of it as state revenue. It's the CPPRT, which is locally generated corporate income taxes that the state then returns to local municipalities, not just the school district, but other municipalities as well. And we've had the discussion multiple times about the fact that the state feels that it overpaid all of the local municipalities and units of local government. They're recouping that. That's one hit. What I learned for the first time is that in addition to that, they've now, the state, the General Assembly has diverted 10% of CPPRT to community colleges. So we're looking at a permanent reduction in our CPPRT funding going forward. Did I get that right, Mr. McConaughey? All right, thanks. So you plug those two things in, and if you figure, we may see some increases, well, depending on what we do with property taxes. If we kept property taxes flat and state revenue goes down and our costs go up, you can probably see what they're projecting will happen in a couple of years. So that's sort of the big picture. And again, like I said, I think this presentation is probably available on board docs in the Finance Committee if you want to take a look at the actual numbers. And again, like I said, everything is just based on assumptions, and anybody who thinks they can know with any clarity what's going to happen in the state of Illinois over the next 2 or 3 years is delusional. But we have to try to make some assumptions,
sure.
just so we can do our planning. I think the other piece of this is that their initial forecast, even for next year, is that we have a $9 million hole to plug, which, there's not any hysteria here. They just know, the administration knows that it's got $9 million of cuts that they need to find to make for the next fiscal year. So that was that cheery bit of note. The next item was impact of reduced CPPRT on general state aid, so that was continuing the same topic. And then we looked at the fiscal year 18 budget calendar review, just looking at the cycle for developing the fiscal year 18 budget. We then heard from our first report from our new auditor, Ms. Michelle Jar. She just went through with us her 5-year internal audit plan. It's a very high-level document, not a lot of specifics, but that will actually be coming to the board at some point to review and approve. And then we did look at the student fees. Ms. Bessonen presented that to the Finance Committee. That was the recommendation that the board approved as part of the consent agenda earlier tonight, which was that we simply keep the student fees the same as what they've been.
Okay.
Thanks. Oh, and the Finance Committee did decide not to have a January meeting. January meeting would have been right after the first of the year. And Mr. McConaughey indicated he didn't think there was enough business to justify us meeting that. So our next meeting will actually be in February.
Okay. Mr. Connor, Operations.
Operations Committee met in this room on Tuesday, December 6th at 6:30. Even though it was not part of that meeting as such, we did give an update that we've had 3 Building Disposition Committee meetings, one on November 29th at Thompson, and I might say, appreciate that 2 aldermen, Alderman Chiarelli and Alderman Beach, showed up to that. Appreciated them be a part of the conversation. We met about King's School on November the 30th, and appreciate that Alderman Hervey showed up for that. And then for White Swan on December the 1st, and appreciate that Cherry Valley Village President Jim Clayson showed up for that. So we've had some conversations got some feedback, and we're moving forward on that. For the actual operations committee, we did a number of items. One is, in terms of the fall housing, overall, the enrollment is down slightly, but in the one piece of hopeful good news is that kindergarten enrollment was up roughly almost 90 students. So we are still facing the same trends, downward trends, but we are seeing at least some positive news on that. One of the questions that's come up in item 2 is there have been, the last 2 meetings, a number of questions on staff utilization, e.g. the building utilization. And the news there is that our number is roughly about 85% utilization, which from my view is actually a pretty good number, but there was some question about how we could improve that. And one of the major pieces of discussion that came out of that is overall staffing questions. And as Mr. Rollins well put it, there are going to be financial pressures. And I believe the number is, 80% is staff-based. And so I think one of the overall conversations we need to have, and I've asked to add officially from ops over to education committee, is a question of a staffing plan, especially over the next 2-3 years for a number of reasons. It just happened to come out of that utilization, but I think it's a conversation we need to have on a larger level. And one of the things we did reaffirm is that that is an educational-driven process. And I will share one of the comments I made, which is we don't make widgets. And we want to emphasize that. That's why this should be driven out of Ed Committee, and that discussion starts there on our education goals. And as Mr. Scrivano pointed out, we have strategic plans and champions that will do all this, but that is something we've put aside to the Ed Committee. Another topic was around life cycle on the buildings. And again, kudos to the administration. A really good job has been done. We now have a CAD system where we're recording everything from windows, roofs, which we went over in great detail. We have actually a multi-decade plan. Very pleased to see that. The operations committee gave really good positive feedback that we can do better long-range planning. So one of the bright spots is we can do a better job and save some money on the various buildings, knowing these things ahead of time, planning better. So very pleased on that one. Another issue was Maywood Church, which is right next door to Jefferson, has asked to purchase for their parking lot extension on the northwest corner of Jefferson. And in spite of the fact that Jefferson wants to create a cross-country path, it was the general consensus on the ops committee that if Maywood is interested in purchasing, and Jefferson, from the feedback we've had so far, has not seen anything that would be adverse impact to the cross-country, then we would say that we would recommend that the board look favorably on that particular purchase. Mr. Schmidt is looking up some of the details because there are some grant details and other details, but generally speaking, the entire committee, it was again consensus favorable. And the last thing is there were some updates on the secondary zones. I don't know, Mr. Schmidt, if you want to say something. I see it's up here, but okay, new business. Oh, I forgot. Sorry. I was so focused on the ops committee. So obviously we have the item on secondary zones. The one thing I will say is the main question that came up was around the consistency as much as possible from the elementary through the middle school and up to the secondary zones. And so some of it looks a little gerrymandered, but that's to try to keep cohorts of students together. And so when you see that, just note that we did spend a bit of time on that. Like the finance committee, Operations decided not to have a meeting in January first week for the same reasons, so we will meet in February, and at the next meeting, we'll talk about the date. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, let's move on to action items, and our first action item is the lease for the Chromebooks. Is there a motion and a second to approve the Title I funded lease for Chromebooks?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Rounds. Any questions or discussion? Not have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the Title I funded lease for Chromebooks.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson, Mr. Rollins,
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano,
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch.
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 no.
Thank you. Our next action item is the fiscal year 16 audited financial statements. Is there a motion and a second to approve the audited financial statements?
So moved.
Moved by Mr.
Second.
Rollins.
Oh, sorry, second.
Okay, second by Mr. Connor. Any questions or discussion? Mr. Connor,
Sorry,
sir, okay,
it was inadvertent.
all right, okay. The coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the audited financial statements for fiscal year 16.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson, Mr. Rollins.
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano,
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch,
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our third item is the Bellis Firm of Architectural Bleacher Inspection and Design Contract. Is there a motion and a second to approve this contract?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Questions or discussion? Not how the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the architect bleacher inspection and design contract.
Mr. Escobedo,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson, Mr. Rollins.
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano,
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Connor.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
The next action item is the authorization for eminent domain at 626 South Third Street. Is there a motion and a second to approve this?
So moved.
One motion,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Questions or discussion? Not, please call the roll.
Ms. Jackson? Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano,
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch,
Yes.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo.
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 no.
We have two final action items. These are real estate purchases. Okay, if we do these together? These are for the addresses of 517 Union Street and 518 Union Street. Is there a motion to approve these?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Rollins. Questions or discussion? None, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on
Miss-
the approval of these purchases.
Mr. Rollins,
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano,
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch,
Yes.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson. The motion passes with 6 yeses and 1 no.
Okay, we will move on to new business and agenda recommendations. First item is Dr. Wolf on the contract for external evaluation services for 21st Century CCLC and a whole bunch of other abbreviations.
Thank you. Yes, well, and since the 90 minutes are gone, I won't explain all of those
good.
abbreviations. Our external evaluator retired, and the other one stopped doing the business, so we started to look for a new one. Under these, actually 5 different grants, 3 of them are 21st Century After School programs, and the other 2 are federal arts-related grants. We're required to have external evaluations done on those grants annually. And so we went out to 6 different firms that offer that, and the lowest responsible bidder was 7 Islands Associates, who can meet all of those requirements. So we're asking to approve that. All expenses related to these external evaluations would be borne by the grants in full.
Questions for Dr. Wolf?
No, it's out of Wisconsin.
I didn't know they had islands in Wisconsin. I guess they do. Okay. I'm looking for the total cost, 40,000 roughly?
It's an, 24,450 comes out of the 21st Century After School, and up to 39,520 for the two federal arts
Okay,
grants.
all right, there it is, okay. Okay, this will be presented at our January 10th meeting for a vote then, thank you. Mrs. Cyrus, you're up next with special education, private and residential placement contracts. Oh, okay, so she was here earlier.
I'm not Mrs. Cyrus.
Okay.
Kathleen Crawler, I'm the Director of Special Ed.
Thank
So
you.
I'm standing in for her
Okay.
today. So this is my first time up here before the board, so
We'll
not
take
sure
it,
how this works.
We'll take it easy on you.
But the contract that you're looking at today is for a residential facility in Freeport that is fairly new.
Okay.
And it's for female students ages 12 to 21. I'll take any questions if you have them.
Any questions or discussion? Okay. This will come up for a vote then at our next
At the
board
next
meeting
board meeting.
as
Thank
well.
you.
Lori Holdley, you're going to present the 5-year audit plan, the internal audit plan.
Yes, Ms. Yar was unable to be here tonight, and she is our new internal auditor, as Mr. Rollins mentioned. She did cover the internal audit charter. At the Finance Committee, essentially, it provides, and before I go there, this is what has to be board approved, is the audit charter, and it provides for the framework for an internal auditor. And so it explains that, yes, it is an independent function. It does report to general counsel, but the functionality reports to the board. So she will be providing periodic reports to the Finance Committee and at least an annual report to the board. She'll also forward any of the audit reports so that all of you can see those audit reports, and we'll be following up with those audit reports as well. By way of background, she did attach to board docs the 5-year audit plan. I wasn't at the Finance Committee, but I thought she presented that, and so if you look on Appendix B, it has the detailed information of what that plan looks like. She did a complete risk assessment of the district's functions and identified those with the highest or greatest risk to be audited within the first year. Not surprisingly, that includes things like construction, since we've had so much construction going on in the district. Some of the other areas fall within finance, and of course, again, that's not surprising because that's where the money is. And so that's where some of the greatest risks are. And then she spaced out the other areas of the audit that are district-wide over the course of 5 years. I can try to answer questions, but again, this is an independent function, so I'm just filling in for her tonight.
Mr. Connor?
Maybe I'll address the question to Mr. Rollins if he would know. But under Appendix B, the categories, I understand, and I'll need to think more about a couple of them, but initial response is that I don't know, I have to admit, I don't know entirely the implications, but under H1, so under information technology, it looks at user security only once every 5 years, according to the schedule, which seems odd to me. User security is usually something that you do almost every year, and so I don't know the implications of that. You know, are they still reporting on it? Is that a special effort? And I have a similar comment on a couple of these where I think, and I'm glad to see under their research and justification for software application purchases, I think that's a crying need, and I know I've talked to the finance folks a couple times that's one where on the approval side, it's actually related back to the purchase and tracking when departments do their own purchasing. So it's just, I guess I want to understand, once every 5 years to me seems a little light for those on the internal audit side.
Well, yes, and these are just internal audits that are done, and what she would do is review and identify issues or concerns, and then follow up periodically to ensure that whatever recommendations she made would have been implemented or identified to the board, or reported to the board that those issues were not fixed. And so what happens is that while the audit occurs every 5 years, the procedures should be put in place, and that she would then audit to ensure that they have been followed over the course of that time. So it wouldn't be that it would happen every year. And what she did was identify the areas of the greatest concerns, which you recognize.
Totally.
The purchase and tracking
Yep.
is one of the greatest ones, so that would occur in the
Right.
first year, as well as the justification for the software application
Which is great, if I
purchases.
might say so. I mean, I'm totally glad that that's occurring. I guess it's just, and particularly in something like user security, not knowing 100% really the definition of it, I would have to say that's one in particular that I might recommend moving that one up, because that's typically an area, and I know in the private sector, we spend a lot of time on that really every year. So I don't know what Ms. Ryan would say, and I would obviously think she would have a voice in what would make sense, but that would be my one feedback. Looking through the list, that one just stood out to me.
So that you would recommend that it occur in year 2, not 3.
Or something, I mean, I would move it up, and I would say that's one of those that, I can't remember the last time we really looked at that, because we've been focusing on other things.
Recently, but through another issue.
Yeah, I just, from my point of view, one of the things I will say is, again, just going from the private sector side, I happen to be on a cyber risk working steering committee, so I guess, when you see a bunch of nails every day, you think about a hammer, right? But the fact is that there are a lot of very macro level concerns on cyber risks. There's a lot of very sophisticated attacks going on across the board, and so, yeah, that would be one of everything in the world. I really think that's one where I would consider having some real threat assessments as well as other aspects. There's about 5 major categories. So I would highly recommend that one move up, and that it would also be something we would do more often, just because of potential vulnerabilities in a number of ways. And it's not a criticism, honestly. It's really more a matter of what's going on in the marketplace and the threats.
Okay.
Mr. Rollins.
I just wanted to add, we didn't get into that level of detail in terms of the plan, but the one thing that she did mention, which we are going to have to keep in mind, is she did say, I'm one person, it's a big organization, and
Right.
she's already sort of saying, based on the initial analysis, and she's going to do the job for a while, but she may be coming back to us and say she can't do it by herself, too.
So my comment is, I would agree with that, and I totally understand it. I'm more thinking of prioritization. So as I look through this list, there are a couple things that really stood out to me. And because there's so much activity, I know that we're doing, and I think other corporate environments are, that cyber risk is big. And I just think that that's one, I would really argue that that's one of the top priorities for us in a lot of ways.
I guess I would just add that I would encourage any board member that wants to sit down with her, with Michelle, which I have done already, and talk to her about my priorities and what's important to me and what I think is important to the board in as far as protection for us and making sure processes are followed properly and protection for our administrative team as well. So I would encourage you, she's a wonderful lady to work with, so. Mr. Escobedo?
Yeah, just a quick comment. So I guess just, it's nice to see a 5-year plan. So just a quick comment here that it's nice to see we have a 5-year plan with specifics, sort of a schedule, but I know we talked about this a lot, but, it'd be nice to see something similar for high school academies as well as academic achievement growth in the future. Where we have more specifics, more targeted plan as to what we're going to do.
Good points. Okay. Mr. Schmidt, I believe you are next. Well, we will approve that plan and the charter at our January board meeting. Mr. Schmidt, secondary attendance zones.
Yes, secondary zones. The board approved elementary zones back in 2015, basically with our facilities master plan and our school consolidation to reduce our attendance zones from 26 to 21. The second phase of that was to look at our secondary zones. Our secondary zones were last done back in 2010 and 11. So we used the same demographer that did all the work for the elementary zones. We used the best planning practices. We looked at it since we were reducing from 26 elementary zones down to 21, we looked at the feeders so we could sit there and have consistent elementary zones feed right up into the middle schools, feed right up into the high schools as best as possible. The maps that we've attached there onto board docs on the left side of it show those feeder plans. On there on the left side, it has a lot of information outside of that, so that will show the actual feeder plans that we have out there. Right down to the zones. If we look at this is the middle school. What we're trying to do when we looked at the zones is minimize the impact on all the students. So if you're looking at this, about 80% of the current attendance zones are staying intact. So we minimize the impact on the students. The first map shows here the areas that are heavily dotted with these black marks, black and blue right there, are the areas that are affected. And most of these areas are where one zone butts up to another zone. So as you can see, this whole zone is just about the same. We're just making some changes right here. And this is based on some of the other presentations that the demographer has presented, based on the heat density that we have out there. And we looked at some of the shifting in the population in Rockford that's shifting a little bit more to the east and to the central of the areas. These are your middle school zones, where this shows the changes that I showed there before. So we'll take this one right here. This line right here is actually West Middle School, where the old West operate there. So now West added this area here. It gave up this area to Kennedy, added this area right there. So not much has changed in the central of each of these zones. The biggest change would be over here with Lincoln. We have a heavier population here in the central. So based on the capacity of that, we had to shrink up Lincoln a little bit, where this was actually Lincoln zones right now reduces down to here. We add a little bit more over here to Eisenhower, coming from Lincoln and some from Flynn up into Guilford. And then we make this shift over in here. This green area is Flynn Middle School, and this is Reese's Middle School. So most of it's the same in there, about 85%. It's just where they're butt up against each other. And a lot of these lines right there actually feed up to the elementary zones. Like this area right here, where RESA used to come right here this way. As we look at it with the new Washington/King, whatever we name that building, their attendance zone comes right there. So we kept that feeder the same, saying, okay, if those individuals are going to go to King/Washington, then that whole zone will go to RESA, and then that whole zone will go over to Jefferson too. So that's some of the things we looked at the feeders. Based off of this, our current enrollment, excuse the highlights, the font was a little bit long on this for formatting. This would be the current middle school enrollment capacity if we leave the zones exactly how they are right now. And this shows like Flynn would be up over 100% capacity. Based on the recommendations we have from RSP, this pretty much balances everybody out other than West and Eisenhower are a little bit below 80%, but all the rest of the facilities sit there and balance them out based on, this is our current data, based on the current zones and the recommended zones. Look at those numbers a minute. Any questions on the middle schools? Through the high schools, we looked at the same thing. There's not much change. You just see a little bit changes where we butt up against each other on the 4 middle school zones. Some of these changes here look identical to the middle school because what we were trying to do is keep the feeder patterns in there. So this line right here is going to be exactly the same as the middle school. This is a comparison of the current high schools. Currently, if you look at this whole area right here, this blue and black line is East High School. Now the new East High School is this pink shaded area here, where they're giving up a little bit of the area here to Jefferson, some of the area over here to Jefferson, this area up to Guilford, and this area here also to Guilford. So these lines are also going to be the same. So this boundary right here at the bottom of the Guilford is going to be the same as Eisenhower. This boundary over here is what I talked about before. That's going to be the same. The elementary feeds all the way up into the middle that feeds up into high school. Not all of the elementaries do that, but we've got a majority of them in there. Based on these recommendations, you can see here's our current high school enrollment as we projected up there, where East was going to be about 116% of the capacity of our assignable capacity. Based on this recommendation, we have everything balanced out there at right at about 90%. So it really evens out the playing field for all the high schools and puts about the same amount of students in all of them. Granted, that's based on our current student enrollment. I mean, things do change, but that's kind of where we're at right now. The other thing we had with secondary schools is looking at the placement of some of our programs. If you remember, in the elementary zones, we recommended changing some of the bilingual programs and the locations out there to put the programs closer to where the students are. So right now, we have the bilingual program at Eisenhower and Guilford. What we looked at, based off some of the recommendations from a demographer, was to move the bilingual program to Risa and Jefferson. A lot of the elementary bilingual sites are in that area too. And based on some of our heat density, where we looked at the students that are actually in these programs, that we would move them closer to where they're at. We initially were looking at phasing in the general ed population out there and just doing a rip the Band-Aid off and move the bilingual program in one fell swoop. We've had 3 community meetings out there. The first 2, we've got a lot of feedback out there on the secondary zones and the movement of the bilingual program. Based on some of their feedback out there, we are now recommending that the bilingual program and the zones be phased in. So basically what that looks at, if you're a 7th grader at Eisenhower right now, even if you're in the bilingual program, you get to stay there for 8th grade. If you're 7th grade this year, next year at 8th grade, you get to stay there, but then when you go to 9th grade, then you will go to Jefferson. If the same thing, if you're at Eisenhower right now and your zone is currently Eisenhower and the changes now put your zone at Lincoln, you can stay there at Eisenhower until you make the new change into high school, and then you would go exactly where your zone's at. So what this does, this chart kind of shows that, represents that of how we would phase it in there. So we would phase in the middle schools over 3 years, and then the high schools would be phased in over 4 years. And again, that's where we're making the recommendation that the gifted, the bilingual programs will go from Eisenhower to Risa and from Guilford to Jefferson. The bilingual department would sit there and move some of those teachers as those grade levels move out there. So basically the 9th grade, or teachers representing the 9th grade for the bilingual program, would be moved over to Jefferson, and they would phase those in over the last few years. Any questions?
I'll start. My first question is about communication. I will say, as a board member, I probably get more calls directly from parents about zone changes than any other topic. And the number one complaint I hear is nobody told us this was coming. And I don't know if that's really true, but I hear that a lot. So I'm interested in, how do parents get told their zone is changing, or how do we do that? What's the communication plan for zone changes?
Well, as we get out there, once we've identified that the board actually has approved these zones, we have this out there, which we did with the elementary zones, is we changed the school zone locator that was on the website.
Right.
We'd send out, communicate to each of the individual buildings of the potential changes in the zones that are coming. We would send it out to the buildings, they would put it in, send it home with the students, and then Mr. Dotson can talk about the other ways that they would sit there and push it out to the
Yeah.
media.
I guess I was wondering whether or not the principal has some role at the school that they're at in letting the family know.
That's where the communication department would send that press release out to the buildings and some other frequency FAQs out there, and then those principals would sit there and send them home with the students. So that's kind of the interaction that the principals have.
You want to add to that?
I guess what I would add is obviously once the decision is made, we use what we kind of refer to as our communications apparatus, if you will. And so we use all of our tools to communicate with parents. As Mr. Schmidt described, sending letters home is just one way.
Right.
But we use our automated phone system, we use social media, we use the website. All parents, people get information in all sorts of ways, so we try to use all of those tools to communicate those changes.
Ms. Jackson?
So how many times have we changed the zones since we've had them at the secondary level? Is this the first time that we've?
Yes, we implemented the zones, and it was about 5 years ago, so this is the first time that we're actually changing the secondary zones.
So I have many concerns about zones, but one of them is there are many things that we said zones would do, and it would offer stability and predictability. And so we're going to change the zones, and that can be very trying for families. Most families, especially if you're buying a home, you're going to buy a home in the zone in which you want your child to go to school. So I may purchase a home in this zone, and then 5 years later, my zone may have been changed. So those are things that we need to be cognizant of as we're changing these zones. Predictability, stability, but yet and still these things can change. And especially if you're buying a home in an area for the school you want your child to go to and your zone changes, that's pretty hard. Even I know families that continually move because, the zones and just different things. So I hope that we're thinking about that, and that's a factor that we're considering as we make these changes for families.
Any other comments or questions for Todd? Okay. This will be presented at our next board meeting as well. Ms. McCullough, do you have a comment?
I just would like to reiterate that this is all based on the demographer's report. There's no, it's not anybody in the district putting anything in place, right? So this is all objectively done in terms of numbers. And that when we went to zones from choice many years ago, how long's that been? I thought we said we would be adjusting them every 3 years, and we actually went a little longer, did we not? So hopefully we get it right so that Ms. Jackson's concerns are addressed, because it is hard on families, but at least we are letting students finish out their time in the school that they're at before they have to make that adjustment. So I'm glad for that, because I would have had a hard time if we did that for, say, bilingual, but then for the traditional students in the regular school, that we didn't. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I understand that it's logical if you have a high school at 116% like East is going to be at, and Guilford, whose numbers are down, that you tweak those zones to try to balance. I mean, that's logic to me, because you can't press the staff at a building like that with capacity they can't handle, because they don't have the room to have a classroom or whatever. I'm just saying, I agree 100% with Ms. Jackson that families are affected by the zone, by the tweaking of zones, and we get calls about it. But I think we have to do a better job, I guess, of communicating and letting people know that this is coming, and so that they can be better prepared for whatever decisions they have to make. So if it's moving or going to one of our special programs or something like that, or whatever, so it's hard. So, but it's logical, I understand that, okay? Any other comments or questions? Any other new business? Oh, did I do that one? Okay. There's a whole list of things of authorizations for eminent domain. Mr. Schmidt, I think there are 5 of them.
Actually, what we have is item E, F, and G are resolutions for authorization of
Okay.
eminent domain for property in conjunction with building of the new school to
Okay.
replace Kishwaukee and Nelson. H and I are also with the land acquisition for new property. This is a real estate transaction where we have reached agreements with the property owners, and we're looking to purchase the property.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Schmidt? Okay. Now, any other new business?
So moved.
Is there a motion to, there's a motion to adjourn.
She still got it.
Okay, all those in
Second.
favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All those opposed say no. We are adjourned at 9 PM.
Quick on the draw.